to Turkey proper. And also Turkey wants to play a role as a kind of regional great power, a natural interlocutor, bringing conflicting and competing sides together to hash out some kind of an agreement. How likely is that to be the case? Well, pressure is building. The Israelis are getting a little bit impatient. The United States, I think, has an interest in a negotiated settlement, certainly not JCPOA 2.0, something a little more comprehensive, dealing with missiles and nuclear capabilities, and also Iran's regional support for proxies like Hezbollah and Hamas. Whether the two or three or four sides, depending on how this is configured ultimately, what the common ground is, what they can all agree on, is really what's undecided at the moment. It's quite clear that there might be a deal on nuclear weapons, maybe even on Iran's proxies and regional geopolitics, but I don't think there's going to be an agreement on Iran's defenses, because Iran sees its missile capability as absolutely essential, and the United States and Israel see those weapons as incompatible with regional peace and security. So that's likely to be the big sticking point here. Whether they can resolve it, I'm actually quite skeptical.
Right, and if they cannot resolve it, then what now?
Well, I can see at least two scenarios, one of which would be an Israeli-initiated military action. They are obviously a little more invested, being in the region themselves, and a little more concerned about Iran's missile and nuclear capabilities, but also its support for proxies like Hamas and Hezbollah. And the United States then would either join in that strike or a parallel set of strikes. Think back to the 12-day war last year, that sort of operation. What would the targets be? I don't think it would be targeted to facilitate regime change. I think it would be targeted specifically on nuclear power, on the IRGC, Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps headquarters and command and control infrastructure, things like that, that actually address the issues that Israel and the US have with Iran, and not to bring about a change of regime.
Right, and the dismantle of nuclear program of Iran, which US and many countries are calling for, it seems unlikely from Iranian side. It seems unrealistic also from Iranian side. So what other channels can they use, all the countries who have problem with this Iran's nuclear program use to de-escalate the situation?
Well, I think at this point it would require a fairly comprehensive deal. For whatever reason, pardon me, justified or not, Iran feels insecure. And how do states deal with insecurity? They arm themselves, in this case with nuclear weapons, but also with allies and proxies, again, Hezbollah, Hamas, etc. But Hezbollah and Hamas have been taken away. And Iran, I think right now, given internal developments, but also external developments, is feeling quite insecure. And in that situation, it's not likely to give up. It doesn't have nuclear weapons at the moment, but it has a very short breakout time, in which it could field nuclear weapons in months, not years, if it decided to do so.
Right.
I can't see it giving that up readily. There would have to be a big deal, which would be reassuring to the Iranians that they're not going to be subject to continuing sanctions and support for dissident movements within the country. And then if that regime felt secure, they might be willing to negotiate away this nuclear capability in development. And that would have to be verifiable from an American and Israeli perspective. The International Atomic Energy would have to have inspectors on the ground, etc. It would have to be a comprehensive deal that really addressed the core insecurities of Iran and the core insecurities of Israel and the United States. And that's a heavy lift. I don't think that's easily arrived at. The JCPOA during the Obama administration wasn't that. It dealt with some of the issues, nuclear, but it didn't deal with a lot of the other issues. So it would have to be more than JCPOA, and I'm not sure that that's in the cards at the moment.
And last but not least, since UAE and Saudi Arabia, also Turkey, have said that their airspace won't be allowed to use by US in terms of attacks towards Iran. So where will US use if it were to use this?
Well, it would have to use carrier-launched aircraft and sea-based assets in the Mediterranean. That's the only way that they would be able to strike. If they're not able to use Turkish airspace or Saudi airspace, Diego Garcia wouldn't be in play. So it does limit the United States' options. And the reason for that is none of those countries, they're all hostile towards Iran, but there's been a kind of détente in the region in the last year or two. And nobody in the region has an interest in a war which could escalate chaos, would affect the price of oil, sometimes maybe in a positive way, but it might pinch off the Straits of Hormuz and the Bab el-Alaba, the Gate of Tears at the bottom of the Red Sea. And that would affect all of the economies in the region. They have no interest in a full-blown war in the region, and therefore are signaling very clearly to Israel and the United States that that's the case, that they're not interested in war, and the signal that they're sending is, you can't use our airspace.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much, Mr. Latham, for sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we come back to you for a later discussion. Now, Turkey is calling for renewed nuclear talks between Iran and the United States. Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan says restarting negotiations would bring significant gains for all sides and could pave the way for lifting sanctions on Iran. He has made the remarks at a joint press conference in Istanbul with Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi. Let's listen into what the Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan has shared.
Müzakereler aynı zamanda İran'a yönelik yaptırımların kaldırılmasının ve İran'ın uluslararası ekonomik sistemle bütünleşmesinin yolunu açacaktır. Bu adımlar tüm taraflara önemli kazanımlar sağlayacaktır.
Meanwhile, Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has struck a firm tone. He has said Iran's missile and defense capabilities are not negotiable. Araghchi has added that Tehran is open to nuclear talks, but only if they are fair and conducted on equal footing. He has also said no meeting with U.S. officials is planned yet, stressing that preparations must come first. Now we move on to U.S. Student organizers have called for walkouts and protests across the United States on Friday to demand that federal immigration agents withdraw from Minnesota. After two fatal shootings of U.S. citizens generated public outrage, the call for a general strike follows last week's protests when thousands marched through Minneapolis in the bitter cold, urging an end to President Donald Trump's immigration crackdown in their city. Meanwhile, a candlelight vigil was held outside a Veteran Affairs hospital in New York City for Alex Pretty, an intensive care nurse at a hospital for military veterans who was shot and killed by immigration officers. Some vigil attendees have responded. Let's listen into what they have shared.
It's very important to a lot of people, and sometimes you don't know what to do. You try to do as much as you can, but sometimes the best thing you can do is just to show up at a vigil. But that's what we try to do, because we're in solidarity and we care.
We are in this fight with you. We believe in everything that you've been in the streets for, and we're going to do everything that we can from where we are to support you and to demand the same thing that you're doing, which is to abolish ICE, to get ICE out of our cities, out of our communities, out of our workplaces.
Now we welcome back Mr. Andrew Latham. He's joining us from Minneapolis. So now that we have heard, supports from New York City's vigil that was held, how do you feel as a local of Minneapolis?
Well, it's a big deal here, despite the fact that there are signals now that ICE might be dialing down its enforcement efforts here. The two tragic deaths have left a mark. The fear amongst, in my case, international students and faculty who are here on work visas and whatnot is palpable. People are very concerned. But it's not just a local issue, of course. It resonates across the country, especially in cities where enforcement efforts have been ramped up and where there's large migrant communities. The mood in the country uniformly, I think, but especially in places like the Twin Cities, which have been subject to these enforcement efforts, is really tense, fearful, and there's a lot of anger as well. So that's a toxic brew of emotions that are now beginning to have real political expression.
And our situation de-escalating?
Well, there's hope there that Kristi Noem, who was the architect and leader of the sort of sweep approach to immigration enforcement, just indiscriminate and broad-based, and let's pick up everybody everywhere. She's been sidelined in this now, and Tom Homan, who's the border czar, who has a much more targeted and low-profile and arguably more humane approach to immigration law enforcement, is now running the show. So will the enforcement efforts stop or fade away altogether? No. But will they look different? That's the hope, that they will be low-key, they'll be targeted on criminals, for example, not on just everyday people. Will it defuse the situation on the streets in Minneapolis overnight? No, I don't think so. The bad feelings will be there for a while. But will the proximate cause of that anger go away? I think to some extent, yes.
Right. And building on your first answer, I would like to ask, how are international students affected by this whole thing unfolding in U.S. and also in Minneapolis, of course? And U.S. economy, is it dependent, or universities, is it dependent on international students as well?
Yes, not only is it good in and of itself, but as part of the business model, international students, part of the revenue stream. Since 2008, Americans have had fewer children, which means that now 18 years later, 19 years later, there are fewer university and college age potential students. And to make up that difference, one of the ways is to bring in more international students. And to the extent that there is a climate of fear, what parent would want their child, legally, by the way, to study abroad? Because the fear is that if you look like you are not quote unquote American, you're subject to this ICE enforcement, this harassment that you don't need. Why would you send one of your offspring into a situation like that? So if this persists over time, it could have a really negative effect on colleges and universities in the United States, quite apart from the terrorizing effect it's having on young people in colleges and universities today.
Right. With that, I would like to thank Mr. Andrew Latham for joining us today from Minneapolis and sharing that insight with us on NewsX World. Now we stay in U.S. Democratic U.S. Senator Elizabeth Warren has criticized President Trump's nomination of Mr. Kevin Warsh as the next Federal Reserve Chair, calling it another move by the president to seize control of the central bank. In a statement, Warren has argued that no Republican should support the nomination until Trump holds his ongoing investigation into the Federal Reserve. Warren's remarks reflect the continued concerns among critics about the administration's influence over the Fed, especially after the public tensions between Trump and current chair Jerome Powell. Now we move the focus on to Bangladesh. Bangladesh will be holding parliamentary elections and a national referendum on February 12th of this year. In the lead up to the polls, political violence and extremist attacks may target rallies, polling stations, and religious sites such as mosques, churches, and temples. The U.S. Embassy in Dhaka has advised U.S. citizens to remain cautious, avoid large gatherings, and be aware of their surroundings. Demonstrations, even those who intended to be peaceful, can escalate into violence. The government has announced transportation restrictions starting February 10th, with a full ban on motorcycles and all transport on February 11th and 12th. As a result, embassy services will be limited on those dates. The country has been gripped by political violence ahead of the elections following the August 2024 toppling of Sheikh Hasina's government. With the ban on Hasina's party, Awami League, authorities are expecting violence to erupt around the poll dates. Now for this discussion, we welcome retired Major General Gigi Dwivedi. He's a veteran and also a professor of international relations and strategic studies. Joins us live from New Delhi.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you for joining. Now, looking at this, what are we to make of current situation in Bangladesh? Do you think that Bangladesh is doing enough to carry out peaceful elections on February 12th?
Well, Suma, it's a very crucial time for Bangladesh. The 12th, elections that are taking place, but the environment are very, very delicate. I would say volatile, because with this new administration under Yunus, first and foremost, the law and order is not very effective. There have been series of violence cases against especially minorities, and the radical elements like Islamist element, Jamaatis are calling the shots. So therefore, it's a very, very, I would say, delicate and sensitive period that Bangladesh is going through. The second point is the fairness of elections. That also is a big question mark, because the major party, Awami League, has been banned from the taking part in the elections, and Jamaatis, which is a congregation or the alliance of 10 parties, are actually being supported tacitly by the current administration. So therefore, it's very difficult time for Bangladesh, and especially, I don't think the law and order enforcement agencies are fully in control because of the kind of violence and the instances that have taken place. But nonetheless, some effort has been made, but I don't think it is enough on the ground. And especially, I have a skepticism that the minorities, which traditionally had supported the Awami League, will be very, very cautious or feel intimidated to openly vote. So on the whole, this is a very, very sensitive situation, very delicate situation, and instances of violence have taken place, and rightly so. Most of the foreign countries, foreign embassies have issued a kind of a warning or a caution that their residents should stay away from the public places or from the places where the gatherings could be attacked, or there can be reasons, or there can be instances of violence. Asuma.
Right. And how do you analyze the current relationship between India and Bangladesh?
Well, first and foremost, the relations between India and Bangladesh have taken a nosedive after Yunus administration has assumed, the power, and there are a couple of reasons for this. First and foremost, Yunus, as a person, is highly indisposed and hostile toward the Indian government. He has a set agenda to bring the radical elements in place. He has cozied up to Pakistan, and today their relation between Bangladesh and Pakistan army actually are growing day by day. More than dozen delegations from each country have visited each other, and some of the very defining developments. Pakistani naval ship Saif, it docked at Chittagong, and the Pakistanis are going to be training the Bangladesh army. There have been joint exercises between Pakistan and the Bangladesh Defense Forces. And along with that is the China. China has a very deep-rooted presence in Bangladesh. They have taken the economic route. About 38 to 40 billion dollars have been committed to the development of Bangladesh. Almost $7 billion have been actually already utilized. And Bangladesh is only yesterday they signed a agreement to produce drones. Also, there's a very sensitive airport very close to the Indian border. That is Lalmorni Hat, and that is being developed as a base. So all this goes on to show that as far as India is concerned, the security is become a paramount issue, and it is directly, affecting the India's sovereignty and integrity, because a statement have been made by the official in the higher echelons and also by the people that India's seven states, which are very geographically vulnerable, because there is a very narrow corridor, Siliguri corridor, of just about 22-23 kilometers, which connects the North Indian states, that they are vulnerable, and they will make effort to even break their contact with India. So all that which is going on, I think, is of high concerns to India, and India will have to take action both politically and otherwise, because if Bangladesh continues its anti-India approach, is some kind of hostility or belligerency, then I think the action will have to be would be rather hard, and that will have impact on the relationship between the two countries. And my last point is also demographics. You know, the kind of demographic changes that have taken place along the India-Bangladesh border, the kind of inundation, also the illegal immigration that are taking place, all these are highly concerning, and I think India will have to take some very stern steps to ensure that our sovereignty and our integrity is not compromised. Asuma.
Right. And you know, you briefly touched upon this, but how could closer defense engagement between Bangladesh and Pakistan influence the regional security here?
Yes, because the point is that after 71 war, the war which I fought,
Yes.
Bangladesh and Pakistan had no relations as such, and their relations were also almost, you can say, in a very cold freeze state. But the point is, after UNIS government has come to power, the whole situation has changed. Now, what is the impact it will have? Because we need to see this whole situation from three dimensions: Bangladesh, then Pakistan and China, because that's a kind of trilateral that is developing. Now there is a direct contact or the connectivity between Bangladesh and Pakistan. The China is deeply interested because of his own interest in Bay of Bengal, his interest in what they call is the BRI, that is the Belt Road Initiative, and also our border with China, especially in the area of Doklam, that is in the Siliguri-Sikkim corridor, is highly contested. So when you put all these things together, the kind of cooperation that is developing between the Bangladesh army, the Pakistan army, the kind of, in fact, the Bangladesh army is mostly equipped by the Chinese equipment and also the Pakistan army. So this also ensures interoperability between the defense forces of Pakistan and China and Bangladesh. And lately, Bangladesh has taken some very concrete steps to step up its defense capability. They are raising a commando brigade or special forces brigade. They are also, buying major equipment. Now, JF-17 is one of the major equipment that is going to be bought from Pakistan, which is a joint venture between Pakistan and Bangladesh. And as I already said, the drone manufacturing facility, the agreement has been signed only yesterday. So all I can say is that this trilateral, the kind of bonhomie, kind of coziness that is going on between the Bangladesh and Pakistan army, overseen by China, is very, very sensitive as far as India is concerned. Asuma.
Thank you very much. With that, I would like to thank retired Major General Gigi Dwivedi for joining us and sharing that insight. Now we move to focus on to China. China is set to lift travel restrictions on a group of British lawmakers. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer has confirmed the move during his ongoing visit to China, the first by a British leader in 8 years. Prime Minister Starmer said he raised the issue directly with President Xi Jinping, who told him the restrictions no longer apply. All British parliamentarians will now be free to travel to China. The sanctions date back to 2021, when Beijing targeted 9 British figures over criticism of alleged human rights abuses in Xinjiang province of China. On Uyghur people, Prime Minister Starmer has stressed engagement allows difficult issues to be raised, but London says it will not lift its own sanctions on Chinese officials in return. That's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.
in the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
Hello and welcome. I am Ellie Richardson and you are watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. US President Trump signals restraint on Iran, saying he hopefully won't need military action and plans direct talks, while Pentagon officials affirm readiness. In Europe, the EU brands Iran's Revolutionary Guards a terrorist group, sparking protests in Brussels and warnings from EU leaders that the region can't afford another war. The US president has declared a national emergency and warned of tariffs on nations like Mexico that provide oil to Cuba, escalating trade tensions. Thailand's reformist politician Natharopayong emerges as front-runner in polls ahead of the February vote, signalling potential shifts in the country's political landscape. After meeting with potential candidate Kevin Warsh, US President Trump confirmed he will reveal his pick for Fed chair tomorrow amid calls for a rate cut. Following US pressure, the ruling aims to shift control over the strategic waterway, marking a significant geopolitical development. China warns to take appropriate measures. US financial markets see extreme volatility as sharp swings in gold and silver and equities lead to $9 trillion movement in capitalization. Trump continues trade war with Canada with renewed threats of discrediting Canadian-made aircraft and charge a 50% tariff on those planes. Towns in Australia's southeast swelter in temperatures close to 50 degrees Celsius as wildfires rage through parts of rural Victoria. And for your top story this hour, a US missile destroyer docked at Israel's southern Red Sea port city of Eilat. Israel's military say the arrival was pre-planned and part of ongoing cooperation between the Israeli and US armed forces. The docking comes as Washington moves more military assets into the Middle East, boosting both firepower and defensive capabilities. US officials say the build-up gives President Donald Trump added military options, including potential action against Iran, amid growing regional tensions. While American warships frequently operated in the Red Sea, their arrival at Israel's Eilat port is considered rare. We are now being joined by Nilüfer Ara, who is an Iranian woman and human rights activist in Turkey. Thank you so much for joining us here on NewsX World today. What message does the arrival of the US warship send about American support for Israel and the deterrence against Iran, and how might Tehran interpret it?
First of all, hi. Second of all, the message is that US is gonna stay with Israel. The first and the last message is this to Iran and to Tehran. And this is just a strategic point of view of mine, but this was pre-planned and they were going to do this, and they already said it that we are going to do this. So this is not a threat or something else like that. But, Iran or Tehran or the politicians of Iran, they might take this as a threat because they had already threatened the United States of America and Israel and some other countries that they are ready to throw at least 1,000 drones. And they have bragged about their military capabilities. So I think this is an answer to them. and this says that U.S. is gonna always stay with Israel and the people of Iran, and they are ready for the war. But I don't think that this war is going to happen. Also, you should know that the Red Sea and the Persian Gulf is a really important geographic is like important geographic point of the Middle East. So they sent their military over there to protect everyone, and that's it.
Do you think an increased US naval presence in the Red Sea will it help prevent escalation, or do you think it risks provoking military response from Iran?
I think it will help them not attack. And honestly, because my father is from RRIB and they are connected with IRGC, I know these guys. I know their mentality. I know their point of views. So they needed to be threatened. This is their only way, and Trump has the right to do this, actually.
And how should regional players and global powers balance military readiness with diplomatic efforts to avoid a wider conflict in the Middle East?
I mean, this was just a revolution, and then it was like headed to a war, like an inside war in the country, in our country. And then when the people of Iran asked Trump or asked Netanyahu to attack them, all of a sudden it turned to a global issue. So for right now, for this kind of crisis, I really don't know who should like interfere or anything like this. But like I just know one thing, that President Trump or like Mr. Netanyahu is gonna do something and is gonna benefit everyone.
And do you think should Israel balance regular joint operations with the US against the need to provoke neighbouring countries?
I feel like sometimes yes, especially for Iran, because they keep threatening that they have nuclear weapons. And this is not just a threat to USA or Israel. This is a threat to all of us, to all of the humanity. Because as far as I know, the people in IRGC, if they get angry over something little, they might throw these nuclear bombs around the world, and they might like attack humanity. So these kind of things are needed to be done in order of the safety of the people of the world, not only the Israel people or like the United States people. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Thank you, Niloufer. Don't go too far, as we will come back to you in just a moment. The Syrian government and the Kurdish-led group, the Syrian Democratic Forces, have said that they have agreed to a comprehensive ceasefire and have phased integration of military and administrative bodies into the Syrian state under a broad deal. Under the agreement, forces that have amassed on front lines in the country's north would pull back, and Interior Ministry security forces will deploy to the centres of the cities of Hasaka and Kamashli in the northeast. Both are currently held by the SDF, and the local security forces will be merged. This comes after the Syrian government forces under President Ahmad al-Shara captured swaths of northern and eastern Syria from the SDF and forcing the Kurdish forces to retreat into a shrinking enclave. We are now being joined again by Niloufer. Thank you so much for joining back with us. What does the possible change in date or location of the next US mediated talks say about the state? What does this ceasefire of the SDF integration mean for Syria's future and unity?
Okay, first of all, let's see something here. The Kurdish people near the Syria and Turkey were always trying to have their own land and own country, right? Especially one of the terrorist parts named PKK. They were all against Turkey, and they were all against Iraq or like against Syria all the time, and they were like saying that we want our own land, which I think they are wrong. This is their land. They are part of Turkey or part of anywhere that they are from. But at this point, this is just a waste dream because this is not going to happen anymore, and this will benefit everyone. This will benefit United States, Turkey, Iraq, everyone. So as far as I see this matter, as a matter of fact, this was the right thing to be done because they need to be controlled by some people, and this is a better way for United States to control them from attacking anyone else or from attacking any country or anyone else.
And can bringing the Kurdish-led forces into the government really end years of fighting, or could tensions continue?
I mean, like this kind of fightings, I think it will continue for years because they're not going to stop for what they think, because they think that they owe a land, which this is like I mean. If I want to say really the truth, we have a lot of regimes, we have a lot of people. For example, I am Fars. In Iran, we have different people like Fars, Turk, Baluch, Lor. They don't come and say, we want our own land. Because Iran is their land. Iran is my land. And it doesn't matter that where are we from? We are all Iranians. But they don't think like that. They don't think that, okay, they are Turkish too. The first thing that it comes to their mind is that no, we are Kurdish, we want our own land. So I think these fights will keep continued.
And what challenges remain in ensuring the ceasefire holds and that Kurdish civil and educational rights are protected as part of this deal?
Actually, I don't know about this, so I'm not going to have any comments upon this. Because if I give you anything further, it will be a wrong information or a wrong opinion.
Okay, no worries. And do you think long term that this is something that will benefit everyone? Do you think it is going to be a long term solution, or do you think this is a short term situation?
This is a short-term situation. The long-term is that, I mean, like, maybe they should start to negotiate with them again and try to make them understand some humanity things. But if they don't understand, then they should do something else.
Thank you so much for joining us here on NewsX World today. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says the next round of US-mediated peace talks with Russia may be delayed or moved. The meeting had been planned for 1st of February in Abu Dhabi, but Zelensky says the timing is now uncertain. Meanwhile, the US Secretary of State Marco Rubio says Washington's top envoys will not attend the next round. Zelensky also said that negotiators have failed to reach a compromise on control of Ukraine's Donetsk region. He adds Ukraine will stop striking Russian energy targets if Moscow does the same. And Zelensky added Russia has halted prisoner of war exchanges with no swaps since October. We are now being joined by Glenn Grant, who is an ex-advisor to Defence Minister of Ukraine and geopolitical commentator. Thank you so much for joining us here today on NewsX World.
Thank you.
What does the possible change of date and location of the next US-mediated talks say about the state of the Ukraine and Russia diplomacy?
Well, basically, it says that nothing is happening, but we knew this. The pressure for compromise for Ukraine is all coming from US because Donald Trump obviously he wants a distraction from Epstein, and he wants a victory to say he's solved another war, but he's not putting any pressure on Russia at all, and Ukraine is willing to compromise a long way, but it's not willing to give up land. And so with both sides, with Russia demanding that land and Ukraine not willing to give it up, there's absolutely no chance of any progress forward without, I'm sorry, but just fighting to win the war on one side.
And how important is the US mediation in keeping the Ukraine-Russia talks alive, and can it succeed if either side is unwilling to compromise?
Oh, the answer to that is they're not keeping it alive. They're keeping it alive for America. They're keeping it alive for Donald Trump. And they're trying hard to persuade Ukraine to compromise. But then the US is not doing anything because, they're saying, unless you compromise, we won't give you security. Well, no leader in the world is going to accept that, especially from someone like Donald Trump, who's actually shown himself to be untrustworthy in his support of Ukraine. So we're not going to go anywhere. We're not going to go anywhere fast, I think, is the answer to that. But America, I suspect, under Rubio, will keep trying, and they'll keep trying and keep putting things into the air that kites that will not fly, I think, is the best description. Unless America gives substantial guarantees of support, i.e. joining NATO, don't expect much to happen in the near future.
How are disagreements over territory stopping progress in the peace talks?
Well, I mean, they are the complete block on progress. Zelensky cannot give up the land. It's quite clear that if he does that, there will be another Maidan, another upsurge of national unrest, and he will be removed and someone else will be put in. And he can't afford that because he'll end up in prison, and he knows that. So he's got to stay stubborn and just say, we're not going to give up anything. And the country doesn't want to give up anything. On the other side, Putin has staked his claim for this. And if he suddenly compromises and he can't find a way to compromise, then he's going to be seen as being weak. But let's be clear about it. Putin does not want to compromise. Putin wants this, and he wants to keep going. He said so. He wants more of Europe. He wants the old Soviet Union back. And frankly, he thinks he's winning. And when you look at some of the political things that are happening, you can see he has some feelings of justification. I mean, he's got Donald Trump in his pocket. He's got the Hungarian boss in his pocket, and quite a lot of other politicians, and a lot of weak European politicians as well.
Could stalled prisoner exchanges and lack of trust on humanitarian issues reflect deeper challenges that go beyond battlefield negotiations and complicate any peace deal?
I don't think that the prisoner exchanges are even part of the peace deal. I mean, they're a sideshow, and they're a sideshow because they're useful for both sides. Russia needs all the skilled people that it can get, and anybody who's been on the Ukraine side or who's fought first is going to be useful, because the turnover of Russian soldiers is so high that any soldier coming back who's got a modicum of skill is likely to be, promoted fairly quickly and put back into the line. For Ukrainians, it's a human rights matter. The Ukrainians want their people back. They want their bodies back, and they're going to keep pushing to try and get Russia to release them. I mean, Russia doesn't want to keep them because it costs them money and energy and time to keep prisoners. So it's far easier to get rid of them. But I don't see that these things are going to affect the peace deal at all. And you mentioned trust. There is no trust. Let's be quite clear. The Ukrainians cannot trust Russians who are both torturing, even castrating prisoners before they send them back. And if you're torturing and starving prisoners, then you can't trust a country like that in any way, shape or form.
What signals does the timing of these renewed attacks on Ukraine, on trains and on energy power grids, what message does that send to the international mediators and potential supporters of this peace deal about the next round of discussions?
I don't think there's any thought in the Russian minds about negotiations and peace deals and anything else at all when they're doing this. Because Russia doesn't care. You have to understand, Russia has no desire to care about what anybody else is doing, except they want it to stop. That's all. They want support to stop. So what they're doing is focused completely and utterly on Ukraine. It's showing Ukraine that they are vulnerable. It's showing Ukrainians that Russia is going to win. It's showing Ukrainians that Russia has got better technology. And the better technology is the main thing. They are identifying different and better ways of attacking Ukraine in depth, of attacking civilians, and they're doing so. So that's the main focus for the Russians, is killing Ukrainians, as many as possible, as quickly as possible, to force them to surrender. That's not a timing thing per se. It's about when new technology becomes available to them, they use it as quickly as possible to put the pressure on Ukraine.
And how far away do you think we are from any start to a peace deal?
Oh, we're not. There's not going to be a peace deal. You have to understand this. This is an existential war, and therefore a national war. It's a fight to the death. There's no peace deal coming. It's not going to happen. Ukraine is going to keep fighting. Russia is going to keep fighting until one side collapses. Russia economically, possibly. Ukraine possibly just running out of manpower. But I don't think either side it's going to happen for a long time yet. So I think we may be 2, 3, even 4 years away still from a collapse on one side. Having said that, Russia could collapse tomorrow because that's the way Russia is.
Thank you so much, Glenn Grant, for joining us here on NewsX World. Taiwan has completed the first underwater sea trial of its first domestically built submarine. The vessel, named Narwhal, carried out a shallow water submerged test off the southern port of Kushang. The trial marks a major step in Taiwan's push to strengthen deterrence against China's navy and protect key sea lanes in any conflict. The submarine is part of an indigenous program aimed at building up to 8 vessels, despite delays and political pressure from Beijing. The project has drawn on technology and expertise from the United States and Britain. The submarine will use a US-made combat system and carry Mark 48 heavyweight torpedoes. Taiwan says it hopes to deploy at least 2 of the new submarines by 2027 as it modernizes its forces for asymmetric warfare against a far larger Chinese military. The Pentagon is at odds with artificial intelligence developer Anthropic over safeguards that would prevent the government from deploying its technology to target weapons autonomously and conduct US domestic surveillance. Anthropic has stated that its AI is extensively used for the national security missions by the US government and that they are in productive discussions with the Department of War about ways to continue that work. The San Francisco-based startup is preparing for an eventful public offering as it also has spent significant resources courting US national security businesses and sought an active role in shaping government AI policy. However, Anthropic is one of the few major AI developers that were awarded contracts by the Pentagon last year. Others were Alphabet's Google, Elon Musk's xAI, and OpenAI. That's all we have time for this hour. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with US a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
In the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with US a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will.
Hello and welcome. I'm Srima Katauka and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. The U.S. Special Envoy Tom Barak has hailed a new agreement between the Syrian government and the Syrian Democratic Forces as a historic milestone. The deal was also welcomed by French President Emmanuel Macron and Kurdistan's region President Nechirvan Barzani and is being framed as a step towards unified Syria. According to a statement from the Syrian presidency, UAE President Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan and Syrian President Ahmad al-Shara held a phone call with each other to discuss strengthening bilateral cooperation, regional developments, and potential UAE support for Syria's reconstruction and investment. US President Trump signals restraint on Iran, saying he hopefully won't need military action and plans direct talks, while Pentagon officials affirm readiness in Europe. The EU brands Iran's Revolutionary Guards as a terrorist group, sparking protests in Brussels and warnings from EU leaders that the region cannot afford another war. Following U.S. pressure, the ruling aims to shift control over the strategic waterway in Panama, marking a significant geopolitical development. China warns to take appropriate measures. Trump continues trade war with Canada, with renewed threats of decertifying Canadian-made aircrafts and charge a 50% tariff on those planes. Towns in Australia's southeast swelter in temperatures close to 50 degrees Celsius as wildfires rage through parts of rural Victoria. Uganda's Army Chief Muhoozi Kainerugaba has apologized to the United States after accusing the U.S. Embassy in Kampala of helping opposition leader Bobi Wine evade the arrest. The incident comes as tensions rise after President Yoweri Museveni won a seventh term with recent raid on opposition leader Wine's home, while Wine remains in hiding. According to a government statement, Burkina Faso's military government has dissolved all political parties, phasing out more than 100 groups. Authorities said party assets will be transferred to the state and a draw law sent to the transitional legislature, framing the move as necessary for national unity. Now for this hour, we start with UK and China. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer has said engagement with China is already paying off. Speaking in Shanghai, Prime Minister Starmer told Chinese and British business leaders the atmosphere has changed and new opportunities are opening up. He has said engaging with China is key to restoring Britain's role as an open, outward-looking trading nation on the global stage. Asked about criticism from US President Donald Trump, Prime Minister Starmer said it would be foolhardy not to engage with Beijing. China has pushed back strongly against US warnings. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Guo Jiakun said Beijing is already to deepen cooperation with Britain and other countries based on mutual benefit and win-win results. Let's listen in to what the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer has shared.
This evening, this is a historic visit to China, the first by a British Prime Minister in 8 years. And we've come very much in the spirit of engagement, of resetting, and setting out a consistent, long-term, comprehensive and strategic partnership. And yesterday in Beijing, we had really productive bilateral meetings, including with President Xi, and we were able to open up opportunities for both of our countries and resolve issues between us. And already I think the atmosphere has changed. The opportunities are opening up, and that's the great prize of engagement. This is an expression of the United Kingdom as an open, outward trading company, making sure that our place is back on the world stage with the necessary relations that we need.
Now for this discussion, we welcome Mr. Keith Vaz. He's a former British minister, joins us live from London. Thank you very much, Mr. Vaz, for joining us. Good to see you. Now, looking at this, how significant is that there's so many bilateral and warming of relationship has happened regardless of U.S.'s warnings?
Well, I think that there's a little bit of exaggeration here. Of course, it's a very, very important visit because no British Prime Minister has visited for 8 years, and we've had quite a few since that. I suppose what Keir Starmer means, it's historic because it's the first time a Labour Prime Minister has visited in over 20 years. So from that point of view, it's a very important visit, and it's one that he has been planning very carefully. So good luck to him in terms of the fact that he wants to spin it as a historic visit, and one that will make a big difference between our relations. I think there's really nowhere for him to go except to China. In this sense, he can't keep popping off to America, because all that happens is he gets criticized by President Trump and Vice President Vance and other people who say that Britain has gone to the dogs, and therefore, they have to find the time to do deals with the Americans. So what this proves is that the British Prime Minister can go to a country like China, and there can be some good deals made in respect of these matters. And there is no question also that something good has come of it. They've signed a number of agreements. Before he came to Beijing, they had approved the new Chinese embassy in London, near London Bridge. So the Chinese must have been very pleased with that. It's going to be the largest embassy of any country in the world based in London. So they're very pleased with that. There's more students coming to Britain from China than there are from any other country in the world, including India. So for all those reasons, the tightening up of relations has been very warmly welcomed by both sides.
Right. Yes, about the embassy thing, it seems like, British government, or Keir Starmer in particular, has decided to put a lot of things under the rug for now, including the Uyghur Xinjiang province thing. So what is the significance of this China lifting also travel restrictions on British lawmakers and all the things I've lined up now?
Oops. Sorry.
Yes.
Well, I think that there have been compromises. There's no question of that. Various compromises have taken place, and that's what, unfortunately, you have to do. In opposition, Labour was quite critical of the human rights record of the Chinese regime about the situation in Tibet, and the fact that certain people have been treated in a particular way. This did not come out in the discussions because Britain needs China probably more than China needs Britain. And now that Mark Carney has gone there, the Prime Minister of Canada, and had such a successful visit, I think that they've decided that they're all going to go there and visit him. And Xi Jinping is going to be feted by all the G7, G8 leaders, other than the President of the United States. So I think it's in everyone's interest to talk up this particular activity and the fact that this visit has taken place.
Right. And, as travel restrictions on British lawmakers have been lifted, but why has the UK said it will not lift its own sanctions on Chinese officials?
Well, that is a question you need to put to him. It's a very valid question and an important one. And I think China will be expecting that should be addressed very quickly.
Right. And last but not least, how do you think US will, or President Trump will say now that, UK has decided to warm up its relations with China, and regardless of US's warnings?
Well, I think that he has to say that, President Trump, because he has caused this warmth of relationship between the two countries, and the warmth of relationship between Russia and the EU as well. They would prefer, I think, under all circumstances, for there to be no relationship with China. But you can't do that because this is now the only game in town. So this has to happen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vaz, for sharing that insight. Please stay with us. Now, looking at Africa, South Africa has expelled Israel's top diplomat, Ariel Seidman, accusing him of violating diplomatic norms and making insulting remarks against South African President Cyril Ramaphosa. Saidman, Israel's charge d'affaires, was declared persona non grata and given 72 hours to leave the country. He's accused of using official social media platforms to attack the president and of inviting Israeli officials to South Africa without prior approval. This diplomatic move comes amid strained relations between the two countries, particularly after South Africa accused Israel of a genocide against Palestinians in the International Court of Justice, a charge Israel has denied. Saidman has been appointed last year, also serves as the charge d'affaires for several neighboring countries. Now for this discussion, we welcome back Mr. Keith Vaz. He's joining us live from London. Now, where does this lead us about the relationship between South Africa and Israel?
Well, I'm surprised the Israeli ambassador was still in South Africa anyway, because as you know, South Africa was leading the charge at the International Court of Human Rights to get Mr. Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, to The Hague and to begin a prosecution of him. This never happened. And I thought that would be curtains for South Africa. I was surprised there was still an ambassador there. I think that the fact that he's criticised the head of state is enough to get him rebuked, and that is exactly what's happened. Obviously, President Ramaphosa has felt this shouldn't have been an insult, and therefore there's no reason why he should be there. So he's been asked to leave. I'm not sure what kind of volume of work the embassy in South Africa did, but the fact is, whatever it did, it can probably now hand to another country who will have to take on the consular services, because there's not much else that can be done now.
Thank you for highlighting that, Mr. Vaz. Please stay with us as we have a breaking news coming in regarding this. Now, in a tit-for-tat move, Israel has expelled South Africa's charge d'affaires in response to the expulsion of its own senior diplomat by Pretoria. Israel's foreign ministry has called South Africa's actions false attacks and a unilateral, baseless step, declaring South Africa's senior diplomatic representative, Minister Shaun Edward Bijneveld, persona non grata. Bijneveld has been given 72 hours to leave Israel. Now we welcome back Mr. Vaz. He's joining us live from London. Thank you very much, Mr. Vaz, for staying with us. Now Israel has done the same. What can you say?
Well, I'm not surprised, Asuma. This is exactly what happens if you send the ambassador out of the country. Then the next thing is that your ambassador gets sent out of the country, and that's exactly what's happened here. It'll take some while to get relations between the two countries back to normal, and it means all their diplomatic efforts need to be handled by another country. In the meantime, they both made their point. I would imagine South Africa's point will be made in a much louder way. It has more allies in the world than has Israel. But that's what happens when you decide to remove the...
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much, Mr. Vaz, for sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now, moving on to Middle East, according to Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan, Turkey is closely reviewing an integration agreement between the Syrian government and Kurdish-led forces. Speaking at a press conference in Istanbul, Fidan has emphasized that genuine integration is in Syria's interest and both parties are already aware of its conditions. This comes amid ongoing efforts to stabilize the region. Let's listen into what Hakan Fidan has shared.
24 Ocak'ta uzatılmış bulunan bir çatışmasızlık süreci yaşanmakta. Bugün de entegrasyon konusunda bir mutabakata varıldığını duyduk. Gece itibariyle bize mesajlar gelmişti. Bu mutabakatı tabii ki yakından inceliyoruz. Gerçek bir entegrasyon Suriye'nin yararınadır.
Additionally, French President Emmanuel Macron has expressed support for the implementation of the ceasefire agreement in Syria, congratulating both Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, not Bashar al-Assad, but Syrian President Ahmad al-Shara and General Abdi on the development. Now for this, we welcome back Mr. Keith Vaz. He's a former British minister, joins us live from Dubai. Thank you very much, Mr. Vaz, for staying with us. Now Turkey has welcomed or is closely reviewing this integration agreement between Syria and Kurdish-led forces. Is it doing so because it benefits them Yes, it benefits them.
Well, I think it does do it because everyone wants peace in the region. And don't worry about the fact that you've just organized a media coup and replaced the president of Syria with someone else. You quickly put him back in his place, because that's been the problem with Syria. It's had so much changes in leadership. Nobody actually knows precisely who's in charge. At the moment, as you said, those who are running Syria need to have a ceasefire, and they need some kind of proper control over their country. And that is what's been welcomed by the Turkish government and by Emmanuel Macron, because France has a particular interest in that part of the region. So I think this is a good thing. We should support the ceasefire and make sure that it holds and that it is successful, because there's nothing worse than it slipping back into a civil war. That would be in nobody's interests. And that's why it's important that it should be supported by all concerned. And hopefully this will get the country back on track.
With that, I would like to thank Mr. Keith Vaz for joining us today and sharing that insight throughout our news from Dubai. Thank you very much. Now we move on to next news. The United Nations has reported that at least 170 civilians were killed in over 400 military airstrikes in Myanmar during its 2-month election period. The airstrikes, which took place between December 2025 and January of this year, occurred amid a widely criticized vote under military rule. The UN highlighted that the actual death toll could be higher due to communication blackouts and fear among witnesses. The election, held under military control, excluded opposition candidates and left many conflict zones, particularly areas with displaced groups and Rohingya minorities, without voting access. The brutal airstrikes have deepened the humanitarian crisis in Myanmar, raising alarms about the country's continued descent into violence under junta rule. Now for this discussion, we welcome retired Colonel Sanjit Sirohi. He's an international affairs, international relations and defense expert, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Colonel, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now looking at this, how is Myanmar trying to, legitimize their government? And what are we to make of these reports that's coming in about lots of civilians being killed during this?
Tuma, good evening. Thank you very much for having me on your channel. Now, we have to understand that after coup, 5 years later, they are holding elections. And these elections are fast. Why I call it fast? Because there was no democratic process was followed. There have been airstrikes going on. And as you mentioned, there were more than 400 airstrikes. And the maximum numbers of civilians which were killed was in 2025. So it was just a rebranding and army rule in the name of civil government, but actually it is the government run by civilians but controlled by military personnel. So I don't think there is any change in the pattern, and there is no change. It is only the rebranding has been done of army rule to a civilian rule. And this violence has gone unabated, and there is no human rights have been totally violated. And out of 330 townships, only 263 went for voting, and in that too, most of the citizens either were not allowed to vote or they were forcefully asked to vote in favor of the candidates who were pro-government. Asuma.
And even though, they, regardless of all this, they have gone ahead with elections. So what now? How are governments, other countries, of course, in other countries supposed to handle or execute their relationship with this current government?
So I think there'll be no change in the relationship between Myanmar and other countries because they may have held the elections, may have gone through proper electoral process, but each and every country knows what type of process has been followed. And in spite of people being threatened, in spite of being feared, there were about more than 324 men and about 80 women who were detained, and they were detained for stupid reasons like online activity and other things. So I think everyone knows about it, even when the UN here is talking about that these elections were totally false and there were human rights violations even during elections. So I don't think there will be much difference in the diplomatic relations of other countries with Myanmar. Maybe one or two countries who are supporting this military junta in Myanmar, they may accept it. Otherwise, I don't think any other country is going to accept this election as fair and democratically elected government. Asuma.
Right, even if they don't accept it as fair, they will have to somehow engage, right? So how will other countries or governments balance that?
No, like there are two ways of doing it. First is that you have the relations with Myanmar and make sure there is some stability there. There is some semblance of stability in that region, because if you see in the Southeast Asian countries, Myanmar plays very important role, and so all other countries, members of the ASEAN, they also want that there should be stability in Myanmar, because unstable neighbor is of no use to any country. So I think they will maintain some sort of semblance as a diplomatic relations, but not much will be achieved by Myanmar by these elections. Asuma.
Right. And what will be the immediate effect of this current government taking over like this and legitimizing their election results?
No, they have already legitimized it. They have covered these elections in 3 phases. The last phase has just finished on Sunday. So they will legitimize it. They will appoint the president or the prime minister and the cabinet meeting. Other things will be there. But all those people will be totally controlled by the military junta. And this are like in any other country, like in Pakistan, everything is controlled by military. In Bangladesh, so far, they are saying that there is interim government, but once the elections are over, once the result comes out, then we will see. So similarly, military junta will be the actual people who will be conducting all this thing, will be controlling the departments. But yes, the face will be of the civilian government, and that will be shown to the international community that yes, we had elections, and now we have a civilian government. But that everybody knows that the civilian government which has won the election, they were all pro-military junta.
Right. With that, I would like to thank retired Colonel Sanjay Sirohi for joining us. Thank you very much. Now we move on to Africa. Paramilitary fighters have kidnapped children during their takeover of the Sudanese city of Al Fashir in October 2025 and in other attacks in the Darfur region over the course of Sudan's civil war, and in some cases killing their parents first. According to reports, the RSF is saying the families that the children would be used as slaves to herd animals. The RSF has been locked in war with Sudan's army since April 2023 over which side will run a country endowed with rich mineral reserves, plentiful arable land and Red Sea ports. Meanwhile, some Sudanese have responded. Let's listen into what they have shared.
يالده واحد عمره 10 سنة، واحد 11، واحد 12، واحد 13 سنة، 4 دول. وهي النادم ده الجنسه الدعم الصريح بعرباته، سحر بعربات ببحم الناس. وايدين العيال ده سايقون نزله ببحم الناس، هو راكب عربية، العيال ده من قدام سايقون بالباحم. ليه خسه حتى الآن؟ ما شفت عيال ده وجوه ودد وين ما عرفت، لكن اتأكدت يعني ده سايقين. ساقوا وفات من طويلة إلى مزمزم. لزمزم مشينا من زمزم، مشينا بطريق كولغي، مشينا في كولغي يتعدوا الدعامة، جونا عربية واثنين مواتر واثنين جمارة. عندنا غنم، بعض الغنم ساقوهم لنا في أطفال اثنين.
We move on to our next news. My colleague and correspondent Aditya Varawan has spoken to the Palestinian Foreign Affairs Minister Varsenaga Bekian as plans for Gaza reconstruction finalized. Let's take a look.
Palestinian Foreign Minister exclusively speaking to NewsX. Ma'am, thank you so much for talking to NewsX. Ma'am, my first question to you is, ma'am, what do you think, what could be, in what areas can India, play a role as far as the reconstruction of Gaza is concerned post this truce happens between Israel and Palestine? Your comments upon it, ma'am.
A lot that can India do. Israel is in need of everything you can think of, from immediate rehabilitation measures, immediate relief measures, to reconstruction. And in between, there's also a lot that can be done. We can have input in terms of the actual physical reconstruction of the buildings, the basic service institutions, or we can have issues related to providing artificial limbs to the thousands of Palestinians that have lost their limbs, the demining in Gaza, the removal of the rubble, you name it, there's a lot that can be done in Gaza.
Ma'am, if I would like to ask you, ma'am, since countries like UK, Canada, France, and Australia are on the verge of recognizing Palestine, do you think that this would, help with the Palestinian cause? And what do you think about this entire situation, ma'am?
They have already recognized, Canada, Australia have recognized, Britain has recognized. So what we want from all those that have recognized to commit to what international law says, to the rights of people to self-determination, moving us from where we are today to materializing the state on the ground.
Ma'am, if I may ask you, what are the nations which are the nations that have come forward, that have, decide that they have said that they will contribute to the reconstruction of Gaza? If you can name some, some of the nations who are proactively saying this, that we will, rebuild Gaza. If you can name some nations regarding that, ma'am.
There are many countries in Europe that have already voiced their intention to chip in, Arab countries, countries in Asia. The most important thing is to look at the plan and see where the interest of each country lies and where their niche is. If, for example, India is good in a certain aspect, then India should chip in towards that, so that we don't have duplication and we have all countries do whatever is of interest to them and whatever most benefits Gaza.
Ma'am, my next question to you is, ma'am, how do you view the constituents of the Board of Peace, which is meant for reconstruction of Gaza, as U.S. President Donald Trump has formed it? How do you see that Board of Peace? Many countries are joining that Board of Peace, which has been formed by U.S. President Donald Trump. How do you view that, the entire scenario?
First of all, the Board of Peace has to give us what is most priority for us right now, which is the cessation of the hostilities, the cessation of the war and the attacks on Gaza, and to have a permanent ceasefire. That is number one priority right now. The Board of Peace composition is yet, it remains to be seen, because, as you said, some countries have joined, some countries are challenging the mandate of the board. And until all of this is aired out, we will have to wait and see who joins and what would be the final mandate of this board as accepted by whoever joined the board.
Ma'am, do you think that even after the entire peace process has been completed and there is a full truce between Israel and Palestine, do you think that Hamas and Hezbollah will also prefer buying peace post that? Because the bone of contention has been that Israel has been saying that recently only we saw that Hamas handed over the last Israeli hostages. So do you think that the situation will prevail normally even after the full truce has been completed between Israel and Hamas?
Well, the peace agreement that was signed was approved by the entities and the stakeholders, and there are guarantors for that peace agreement. And the agreement has to move on with all of its items as stipulated in the agreement, which means compliance by all parties, Israel included. So we hope to see that everyone takes the interest of the region, their own countries, their own projects. For us as Palestinians, the Palestinian National Project as the most important to preserve and move on accordingly.
Like my next question to you is, ma'am, what is your forward strategy? Are you like as far as the UN General Assembly is concerned, there have been many instances where the Palestinian leaders have been voicing raising their voice at the UN headquarters, for the recognition. So what is your forward forward strategy as far as making this issue of Palestine international on a global level? Already it is a considerable issue at the global level, but what is your strategy if we talk about your plan of action at the UN General Assembly, ma'am?
Well, our plan of action entails whatever we can do to steadfast our people in Palestine, ensuring there is no displacement of Palestinians, neither from the Gaza Strip or the West Bank, because we want Palestinians to steadfast in their country, to build their country, to struggle for the independence of their country. So we will continue advocating for that. We will continue advocating on the recognition front, because there are still countries that have not recognized, and we will continue saying that whoever is for international law and says they are democratic and comply with international law and believe in the rights of people to self-determination, they should come forward and recognize the state of Palestine.
Ma'am, my next question to you is, how do you see India-Palestine ties, to move forward in the times to come? Already we know the diplomatic relations between India and Palestine have been excellent. So in the way forward, in the next few years, how do you see the diplomatic relations between India and Palestine panning out, ma'am?
I hope the positive and the productive relation that has prevailed for decades will continue. This entails India continuing to support what it has supported for long, the two states and the independence of the state of Palestine, and it will continue with its development and humanitarian assistance to the Palestinian people.
Thank you so much for talking to NewsX. So this was our Palestinian Foreign Minister exclusively in conversation with NewsX. This is Aditya Vadhavan reporting for NewsX with video journalist Avinash, Delhi.
In the midst of death, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
Hello and welcome back to NewsX World. I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching Focal Length, where we get you a briefing on topics from across the world. Global alliances are under strain as great power competition intensifies. Questions over US alliance credibility, strategic contestation in the Arctic, and the brutal realities of modern urban warfare are reshaping defense thinking worldwide. From the Gaza conflict to the rise of artificial intelligence in military operations and Australia's Strategic Balancing Act in the Indo-Pacific, the security landscape is rapidly evolving. To discuss these issues and more, we are joined by Dr. Peter Layton, Associate Fellow at the Royal United Services Institute, a former RAF officer and strategist. Dr. Layton has written extensively on grand strategy, air power and future warfare. Thank you very much for joining us. It's a pleasure to, of course, have you on the programme. Let's get straight into this. Dr. Layton, you've highlighted Australia's emerging dilemma regarding the US administration's threats towards Greenland. How do you assess the potential impact on the trustworthiness of the US as an ally for countries like Australia?
I think for countries like Australia that we have to reconsider and rethink our US alliance. Now, in a way, this is sort of going back to the past. When Australia was subject to the American Guam Doctrine, which was, if you like, between the end of the Vietnam War in the middle 1970s until the end of the Cold War around 1990. In that period there, the understanding was that America would help Australia in a war only if it was in America's interests. In other words, America wouldn't, if you like, help Australia in Australia's interests. It had to be strongly in America's interests. And I think that is sort of where we are now. And secondly, under the Guam Doctrine, what it meant was Australia had to provide the combat forces, but America would agree to sell us the arms. So it was very much a hand alliance at arm's length, if you like. We were sort of friends, but not sort of alliance in that sort of NATO sense. And I think thirdly, after the Cold War, our alliance was seen by the Americans as a global alliance. So Australia and other nations would go help the Americans in the Middle East and Afghanistan, not just in our own region. So I think now what will happen will be these alliances will be very much regional. They will no longer be a global alliance, if you like, where sort of nations go out of their region and help the Americans, but they'll be very much targeted and fairly narrow.
And regarding the US interest in Greenland, what strategic implications do you see for global security, particularly in the Arctic region, if such territorial ambitions were to escalate?
So I think, to be honest, the Arctic has been somewhat oversold, and President Trump has been keen to say that he feels a psychological need to acquire Greenland, and if you like, have a definite place in history books, in the history of the United States. If we look at the strategic rationale here, while they talk about the Arctic becoming ice-free, that doesn't mean that there's no ice there, just that ships can then navigate around certain portions of it. And if you like, going from Asia through the Bering Straits along the northern part of Russia into Europe seems plausible for, say, Chinese and Southeast Asian shipping as a shipping route to Europe. But if you look at Greenland, on the northern part of Greenland, between Greenland and the North Pole, is the largest pack of ice, and this is not expected to be ice-free, to melt until right at the end of this century. So I think this shipping route stuff is being oversold, if you like. And the second thing is the famous Golden Dome. The Golden Dome is a very mysterious program, but we shouldn't sort of apply too much sort of technology to it. If we look at the recent war in October 2024, the Iranians fired about 200 ballistic missiles against Israel, and about a quarter, that is about 50 of them, hit. Now, if we think of Golden Dome as being some anti-ballistic missile shield that will shield the United States from approaching Russian rockets, if it achieved the same success, which is actually very good from a military point of view, you would still have, probably the Russians would fire about 600 missiles. You would have 150, say, impact the United States with warheads 100 times that of the Hiroshima nuclear attack. 150 US cities would be completely destroyed. So Golden Dome is not, if you like, a defensive shield in that sense. It's more of an industrial package to help American industry compete. So that's where I think we've got a bit mixed up here. There's a number of American ideas and the president's policies, but actually it's just a fairly simple expansion of the territory, if you like.
And turning to the ongoing situation in Gaza, based on your commentary on Israel's military objectives, how effective do you believe the current strategies have been in achieving goals like destroying Hamas tunnels or demilitarizing Hamas while minimizing civilian casualties?
Yes, there is no doubt that the war has been long, it's been brutal, and it's been very violent. I suppose the acid test of whether a strategy is effective or not is if it works. It took them 2 years from when the Israeli Defence Forces first went into Gaza to reach a ceasefire. So I think the strategies were rather inefficient and rather ineffective. So I don't think anyone will be copying them in the future. The Israeli Defence Forces used to be known for having decisive victories, if you like, have a short war and then win. But